Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And in this episode, we are going to be discussing chapters 35 and 36 of ACOTAR.
Some dark stuff.
We are under the mountain.
Very under the mountain.
Which, by the way, I hadn't even thought about this. Is one of those places where I can't wait to do some like deeper stuff within our groups, but do we have like an overarching metaphor for being under the mountain? There's something there we need to discover. So I think this is one of those places where I've seen like metaphor and like little moments, but I think that once we get to the end of this book, there's going to be like under the mountain is going to represent things. Yeah. Ooh, I can't wait to think about that. I can't wait to get to the end of this book and then go back and do some episodes that are really looking at things from like a bird's eye view where we've been in like chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
Which I think that might be some stuff that just happens in our circle community. So you might have to come hang out. Okay. But we are literally under the mountain with Feyre right now.
And we know now, right, at this, but this isn't a spoiler, that we know we're going to have to be here for 3 months, right?
We know we're here. That's the plan. We know we're here because they're doing it on the, is it the full moon every time?
It's the full moon every time.
Full moon. So we know we've got 3 trials coming up unless she can solve or no, wait. Do we learn about that in this chapter? Never mind. I didn't say anything.
Well, it's okay. So, at this point, we've finished the chapters.
Right.
Nobody's watching this without reading these chapters. I hope that everything would be way out.
So we're going to be there. Yeah, we're going to be under the mountain for 3 months unless she can solve Amarantha's riddle. But okay. So we're...
I can't imagine a place, a different place where like 3 months here, really? Like, this is horrible. How can we get three
really
days
is.
Would be horrible.
Okay, so we've recorded a lot of episodes today so that we know where we're at and where you guys know where we're at. Chapter 35 and 36, the big things that happen.
Right.
Lucian's going to come to her cell and heal her broken nose. Mm-hmm. Feyre's going to get brought before Amarantha because Amarantha wants her name. She's going to find out what the riddle is, and then she's going to go through her first trial. So, I mean, this is a lot happens in these couple of chapters. But okay, so starting at the beginning, she wakes up and
aches worse than anything she'd ever endured. What a nice way to wake up.
She's trying not to panic. She's trying not to think about what's happening. She's realizing
my wits together.
Oh, she's realizing that like, oh my goodness, there may not even be enough left for her to torture. And she's hearing whips cracking outside. They're screaming. This is
just hell. It's hell. It's the hell that I was raised to believe in. She's there.
Oh my gosh,
she's
it's
there,
so rough.
And she's trapped.
Oh, okay. So in the midst of her being in this cell and totally freaking out and kind of having a what did I get myself into moment.
And feeling like she deserves all this because now she's seen what happened to Claire better because of her naming her.
Oh, all right. Thank goodness Lucian shows up.
Lucian shows up.
Okay,
save
so
the cat moment.
We're not totally alone.
But then he starts shooting all over her. Damn it. You shouldn't have come, Feyre. You weren't meant to be here. Don't you understand what he sacrificed in getting you out? How could you be so foolish?
And she's like, well, I'm here now.
Well, I'm here now. I'm here. There's nothing that can be done about it. So don't bother telling me about my weak human flesh and my stupidity. I know all that. And she wants to cover her face, but it just hurts too much. I just had to tell him that I love him to see if it wasn't too late. So you know about the curse then. Know everything.
Yeah.
At least I don't have to lie to you anymore. There's the silver lining.
We can be
Lucian
honest.
and Feyre can have an honest conversation.
But I love this, and this moment of, now, we've talked a lot about her self-talk, this like my weak human flesh and my stupidity. And it's interesting. In this place, it's almost accurate because she recognizes they are actually physically stronger than her.
Yeah, she actually has weak
human flesh. And
the stupidity, though, is still like
it really is.
It is a little.
Well, I mean, the idea of like you are most likely going to die. Alice is like, you're lucky if you're going to get a clean death, and she's like, I'm going anyway. Like, yeah. I mean, it's a fool's hope. But that's the thing. When she went under here, she's like, she knew that, but that wasn't the point.
Yeah.
The point was like she wasn't going to be able to live with herself if she didn't do this, and so she's like, hey, I get it. You don't have to tell me all of that, and I'm here anyway. So let's just like look at all of this. Yeah, she didn't want to live with that to live with that sort of regret, which I get. Okay, so thank goodness he's here, though.
And he has a little bit of magic, so he can clean her up a bit, but
she-
not clean her up too much.
Right.
So no one knows that he cleaned her up and fixed her nose.
Healed a little bit, but healed not all the way. Yeah, and so we find out that they're now all trapped under the mountain.
Thank goodness there's no mirrors under the mountain, because this is not Feyre's loveliest. Bless her heart, black eye, puppy face, bruises everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
When she finds out that everybody's trapped under the mountain,
Until everything's over.
her stuff is over.
Which she recognizes is what he almost says is basically until you're dead. Like she recognizes it's not until she finishes the trials. She's gonna be lucky if she gets through one. Okay, but so thank goodness he was there to help her, otherwise she would have been in horrible shape.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some time in her cell, and then she gets called to the throne room because Amarantha would like to know her name.
Oh, and she's back in her survival mode, so she's noting all the exits and everything on her way. Of course she's back in. She's definitely barely surviving at this point.
Yeah, which is interesting. Like you know, again, like being in survival mode and not thriving mode. I'm like, my goodness, sometimes we actually are just. There's a reason that we're there. Very few people are like, gosh, I feel like equally capable of like surviving or thriving today. Which do I pick?
But now that I'm actually going to take a note from Feyre's wisdom that she's learned in all of her years of survival, and I'm going to start when I feel like I'm in survival mode. Maybe I'm going to start noting the exits in my life. Where can I just
Ooh,
exit a
Fred,
little bit, right?
hold on. That's a deep thought.
Right? Good. Thank you, Feyre, for that.
Where are the exits? Sometimes I call them the off ramps when we're thinking about like these like thought loops that keep us trapped. I'm like, because we sometimes build these like perfectly constructed, look, this to this to this to this, and then ta-da. I'm like, okay, that was kind of like Feyre's thought life, where it's like, well, this was logical and this made sense, and then there wasn't, but that let us get to here where we can't see our own logic. I'm like, okay, where's the off ramp? Yeah. What's the off ramp? How do we get off of this loop? But I love that analogy. When you're in survival mode, where are the exits?
Start looking for that.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Okay. Now this is an interesting moment with Rhysand.
Yes.
So we know, and so this is what we know. They met on Fire Night, and then whenever he saw her in Tamlin's Manor, he knew who she was.
Her right away. Yeah.
Then she gives Claire's name, and it sounds like he's either the one that went and got this girl or somebody else brought them back. And she's like, "Is this the girl you saw at Tamlin's estate?" He's like,
I suppose.
I suppose. But did you or did you not tell me that girl
Pointing at the corpse
was the one you saw? And it was, humans all look alike to me.
Yeah. They all look alike to me.
Oh my goodness. And this, you know, when she calls him out, she's like, I didn't believe him for a second. He knew exactly how I looked. He recognized me that day at the manor. So she's starting to get the idea there's something else happening with this character. Like there's something else happening here, and we get more information at the end of the next one. But we know that that's a thing. Okay, so she wants to know her name. Rhysand won't give it to her. He's like, I don't know. She lied to me, right? Yeah. And she can't tell. She's like, he's like acting too nonchalant about this. She's like, is this a joke? Is it court scheming? She cannot quite read this dude because the way that he's showing, like reacting in this situation is so off from how everybody else is responding. Okay. But then while she's preparing for, oh my goodness, what if he attacks my mind? That's not what happens.
No.
Instead, Lucien gets dragged forward and she has him hold his mind. And we can see.
Didn't see that one coming.
Didn't see that one coming. And so now she's trying to force him to tell her name. Lucien's so loyal. We know he's probably not going to.
And his brothers are there. We get to
his
see
brothers.
what classes they are.
Yeah, we've so far, up until this point, we have not met anybody in his family that seems like a decent human being, except for him. Thank goodness he got out. And we know that his brothers are on her side because they're like, well, if we knew, we'd be the first to tell you. Okay, so we're like these are people who it seems like are willingly siding with her, and that tells us a lot about them. Okay, but so she makes a call here where she realizes that Lucian's in danger, and he's whatever, she's giving Rhysand the order to kind of shred his mind. But she stops him. She shouted, Feyre, my name's Feyre, to, and when she does, they step back and they let him go. So she gives up this information for him. Okay. So intense scene, and then we move into the riddle. Okay. Which I do think I was trying to remember. I think she did mention the riddle before. She just hadn't told her what it was.
Yeah.
Right. So that was part of.
Promised you a riddle.
Yep. And so here's what it is, and she gives the riddle. Okay. Question, friend. When you read it, did you know the answer?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I guessed at what the answer was, but I was just like, no. And then I think later when we do find the answer, I was like, I think I knew that.
I think I did too. And that was interesting because, I mean, I know that she's not the most learned person and she's illiterate and that's like a whole part of it. But I would be curious again to hear anybody listening, like when you read it the first time, did you know the answer? Like how many people when they read this as a reader felt like the answer was pretty obvious? Because I cannot guarantee my first read through, but I am 99% sure that I'm like, oh, yeah, I know what the answer to that is. But that's the interesting thing is like she's in survival mode.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Your brain's not available for that.
Being in fight or flight is not conducive to doing things like solving riddles.
Yeah. I'm not great at riddles to begin with. I can figure out puns. My oldest son is very into puns, so I can almost always guess his pun before he gets to the punchline. But
is he very punny?
He's so punny. But riddles, I'm definitely 50% or below on like actually guessing them because my brain just goes, what? What are you saying?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I did.
And that's the thing. That's where I'm curious for people, but there is so much truth in, and there's just basic like biology in what happens within our brains and our bodies when we are in fight or flight. And it's not always, and being in more of a fight or flight thing, it's not always a trauma trigger. Like it's not always that depth. Like sometimes people just have like unending work deadlines that put us in this space. And then when you're there, a bunch of stuff actually changes in your body and it's not like you can control it. But yeah, your digestion shuts down and like what parts of your brain you have access to shifts and it's not like anybody's picking that.
And it would make sense too that that would be a part of your brain that's not available to you because that you're not normally going to be sitting around trying to solve a riddle for survival. Now in this case it is, but our brains normally just assume a riddle is not a life and death situation, so that's not going to get high enough priority.
Right. Because I mean, really, it's like either I have to fight a threat or I have to run away. Okay, so what do we need for that to happen? What do we not need for that to happen? And it's all survival based. Yeah, but poor things. And it's just a reminder. Yeah, I'll have people who like their nervous systems are a mess, but then they're like, why can't I figure this out? And I'm like, because your
really
brain's not
basic,
online,
easy stuff,
right?
But
And there's and there's self-judgment, and there's a big difference between like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? To my brain is incapable of doing that right now because I'm in fight or flight, and to have the awareness to to be that self-aware in the moment, I think takes time to be able to be in that and recognize it. But whenever I stopped judging myself for being incapable of doing things that like I actually couldn't do because it was of where my nervous system was, if that sentence made any sense. Just a lot of judgment. There were just so many things where I'm like, well, I should be able to do that. It's like, actually not. That part of your brain isn't even online right now.
It's impossible.
It's actually impossible. So no, you shouldn't be able to do it. Yeah. But so being in fight or flight, and again, I think it's one of those reasons why I love coaching. It's why I love safe friendships, because as soon as we get into a situation where it is stressful and it is emotional and it is painful, we lose the ability to see it clearly. And, to have a place every week or every so often, or to have a person that you can show up to and talk something out, and to have somebody reflect things back to you and see what you can't see. And for a lot of things with my clients, they'll come in and sometimes they think too highly of me. They're like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. I'm like, no. You could have seen this too if you weren't so close to it.
Yeah.
Right? It's just the emotional thing. I'm like, I didn't do anything profound there. This was just that I'm not emotionally attached to what's happening. Like, I'm just on the outside and it's very neutral to me. And so therefore I have all of my brain where, you're in the midst of these really strong emotions. And it's not even about this like massive wisdom. I just think that we all need that. And yeah, just to know that we're all going to have those places, especially if it's something that's highly emotional or highly triggering, to just have that awareness of like, oh, the thought of I should be able to figure this out doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, you actually may not be capable of figuring it out if your whole brain isn't online. And it's why having support in place, I think, is really helpful.
Yes. If only we could know when we're going to need that.
Right.
Usually we don't.
Usually don't.
The fight or flight comes upon us.
Right.
We don't expect it.
So we have the riddle.
Yeah, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't even come up with a possibility. Like, so she can't even come up with a guess that might be wrong. She's like, I can't even. I'd be better off slitting my own throat and ending my suffering there before she could rip me to shreds.
She also has this moment here of noticing how Amarantha emphasized the word immediately with this one. And now she's like, oh my goodness, does that mean are the conditions of my trials different from those of the riddle?
Is she gonna like free us, but like in 500 years or something when they get to the
Okay, so end of this chapter, she goes back to her cell and she just obsesses over this and what this may mean. Oh, like, I love this. I was being paranoid. I was overthinking. And she has to solve it, but she just can't.
And of course, the pressure, because it could free everybody, is not helping her brain.
It's not helping at all. Yeah. All right, so chapter 36, we have her first trial. And yeah, I think we'll just let you all read this. It's so
the meeting confirm.
Oh, we have to always say it in.
It just lends itself to that so much.
Okay, so she gets through this. So let's just say, can we just say she's just a badass here?
She is, and I love that she has one moment of good self-talk. Well, I ripped away mud, wriggling, kicking, pushing, sobbing through my gutted teeth. Not like this. Like this. She doesn't just give up. She's like, no, I'm not gonna go like this. She's gonna fight it.
Yeah,
to the end.
And so we have some different things here. We have some other Rhysand moments here where he's noticing things that other people aren't noticing. Yeah. He's the first one that notices what's happening, that she's building a trap, and he seems to be kind of like smiling about all of this. And he's
definitely entertained by her.
Yep, and he gets that like the mud made her invisible, like he's getting all of this. We have a great Lucian moment where he saves her by shouting to your left. So, oh my gosh, but then this moment here. So she jumps and I flipped over myself and screamed as something hit my arm, biting through flesh. Okay, but I didn't have to think about it, to even look at it. Just get out of the way, get going. And in the end, she did it. She killed it. It's dead. Okay. So we have gasps, we have cheering. But she couldn't really feel much of anything as she edged around the worm and climbed out of the pit, still holding the bone sword in my hand. Again, all of this you got to cheer for her. I mean, she's just she's just badass here.
This is just true, solid badass.
She just really is here.
And then Amarantha's got her. Oh, she no longer looked up at her from beneath lowered brows and didn't check myself as I exposed my teeth. So Amarantha's no longer has her hand on Tamlin's knee. My Tamlin, favorite things. I tightened my grip on the long bone in my hand. I was shaking all over, but not with fear. Oh no, it wasn't fear at all. I'd proved my love, and then some.
Because that was the whole point of this trial, was proving her love, which is ridiculous. It's not a thing.
So dumb.
that needed to be proven, but she's like, well, I definitely did. It was never a thing that needed to be
Yeah.
proven. You know, and I think there's definitely some metaphor in there of like, oh my goodness, like the amount of times and like the amount of conversations, like noticing with myself and other people when we're trying to prove that we're a good person. We're trying to prove we're a good mom. We're trying to prove we're a good wife. And we're taking action to try to prove these things that do not actually need to be proven. And what a weird dynamic that creates. And like, you know, like what if we all just started with the assumption that we were good people?
Yeah.
Like life would be so much simpler if we weren't constantly trying to figure out like, okay, well, what would a good person do? Well, like, let's just assume you are a good person. And like, what would you do? Okay, so then she's so worked up and she throws the bone.
Yeah. Well, Amarantha, geez. I mean, that's like, even though she's an evil, horrible person, it's still like, that's remarkably loaded. Well, I suppose anyone could have done that. Like the hardest, most badass thing I've ever heard. I mean, no one I know has ever had to do anything like that. I suppose anyone could have done this. Like after birthing your first child, if you have had a traumatic first birth experience, as I know you and I both did. Somebody at the end of all that going, well, anyone could have done that.
It's like, I'm gonna throw a bone at your dress.
Throw a bone at you with all of my remaining strength.
A muddy bone.
Which is very
Oh my goodness. Strength. And splatters her white dress.
Yes.
It's a good moment.
So good.
Okay, so we have another interesting moment here where we're learning a little bit more that there are dynamics at play here where she says, I suppose you'll be happy to learn most of my court lost a good deal of money tonight. And she looks and sees that like, yeah, pretty much everybody except for one. There's only one person who said you would win. Not surprising. And as they haul her out, she says, Rhysand, come here. So they don't say it directly, but we get the idea that for whatever reason, he's the one that bet on her. So that's just an interesting dynamic with him. Okay, so before we saw her fall, we know that it hurt. She just had to push through for adrenaline, and now we see what happened. She looks down her forearm and sees that there is
it's as bad as it can get.
Blood, ripped tendons, and bone clean through it. Couldn't even say thank you, couldn't even look back. Before the pain consumed me whole, I could barely manage to walk back to my cell. So she technically won, but this is major.
Yeah. But it's not like she can just drive herself to the ER at this point and get fixed up.
Nope, because she's strapped under the mountain. Dun, dun, dun. So I feel like, again, mixed thing here. So she won, but we are ending on the edge of a cliffhanger here where we've got major damage to her arm. We're going to have to see what she does about that in the next chapter.
Thanks for watching, guys. Getting through these 2 chapters with us. And we would love for you to join us in our community at ACOTAR, that's ACOTAA.circle.so, for more juicy goodness where you can really get a little more involved in this whole adventure that we're on here. We'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye.